Some calls change your life before you even realize you made them. The rain came down in relentless sheets, turning the cracked asphalt of the alley into a shimmering mirror of neon signs and flickering streetlights as Emily Carter pulled her thin jacket tighter around her shoulders. Her sneakers soaked through after a 12-hour shift that barely covered half her rent, her fingers trembling not just from the cold, but from exhaustion that settled deep in her bones. The kind that didn't go away with sleep. The kind that followed you into your dreams and waited for you when you woke up. She should have taken the longer route home, the safer one with people and light and noise. But shortcuts were cheaper than rides, and tonight every dollar mattered. Then she saw him, a figure slumped against the brick wall, like he had simply run out of strength mid-step, her breath catching as she hesitated for only a second before moving closer, because walking away wasn't something she knew how to do, not when someone needed help. "Hey," she called softly, crouching beside him. "Can you hear me?" His skin was cold, too cold for someone out in the rain. But there was something else, something off, something that made the fine hairs along her arms rise. She pressed her fingers lightly against his wrist, searching for a pulse, and froze when she felt it, slow but steady, not normal, not human. Okay, you're alive," she whispered, more to herself than to him, her eyes scanning his clothes, dark, perfectly tailored, untouched by the grime of the alley as if the world itself refused to stain him. Then she noticed his hand, clenched tight around something metallic. She gently pried his fingers open, revealing a ring, heavy, engraved with a crest that looked ancient, intricate lines forming a symbol she couldn't understand, and inside, etched carefully, was a phone number. Emily stared at it, her heart beginning to pound as instinct screamed that this wasn't something she should touch, that this wasn't normal. But nothing about tonight had been normal since the moment she turned into this alley. Her phone was already in her hand before she could second-guess it. She dialed. One ring. Two. Then the line clicked. "Speak." The voice on the other end wasn't a greeting. It was a command, deep, controlled, carrying something beneath it that made her chest tighten. I found someone," Emily said, forcing her voice steady. "He's not okay. I think he needs help." Silence, then sharper, colder. "Describe him." She swallowed, glancing down at the man. "Tall, dark hair. He's wearing expensive clothes, like really expensive, and he's not waking up." Another pause, longer this time, heavier, like the air itself had thickened. "Stay where you are," the voice said finally, slower now, more dangerous. "Do not leave him." The line went dead. Emily stared at her phone, her pulse racing, a strange unease settling in her chest as she looked back at the man, at the unnatural stillness of him, at the way the rain seemed to fall around him without truly touching him. Minutes passed, maybe 3, maybe 5. Time felt warped, stretched thin. Then she heard it. Not sirens, not tires screeching, just the low, smooth hum of engines, too quiet, too precise. Black vehicles sliding into the alley like shadows finding their place, doors opening in perfect synchronization as figures stepped out, tall, composed, their movements too fluid to be casual. One of them approached first, then stopped, stepping aside. And that's when he appeared, taller than the rest, his presence swallowing the narrow alley whole, his gaze locking onto the man beside her, then lifting slowly to meet hers, and everything in Emily's body went still. Like some instinct deep inside her recognized something her mind couldn't understand. "You called," he said, his voice the same one from the phone, but closer now, heavier, carrying a weight that pressed against her chest. She nodded, unable to speak. His eyes dropped to her hand, to the ring she still held, then back to her face, something unreadable flickering in his expression. "You touched him." It wasn't a question. Emily's throat tightened. "I was just trying to help," she managed. The man studied her for a long moment, too long, as if he was searching for something beneath her skin, beneath her thoughts, something only he could see. And when he finally spoke again, his voice was quieter, colder. "You should have walked away." Emily's heart skipped, a chill running through her that had nothing to do with the rain, because something in the way he said it made one thing terrifyingly clear. She hadn't just helped a stranger, she had stepped into something she could no longer step out of. The air shifted before anyone moved, like the world itself was holding its breath. and Emily felt it in her chest, tight and sharp. As the man stepped closer, his presence swallowing the narrow space between them until she could feel the cold radiating from him without him even touching her. His eyes flicked once more to the unconscious figure against the wall, then back to her. Calculating, precise. "Step away," he said quietly, not raising his voice, but the command in it left no room for hesitation. Emily's legs obeyed before her mind could catch up, her sneakers scraping against wet pavement as she moved back, clutching her arms around herself like that might somehow protect her from something she did not understand. Two of the men behind him moved forward immediately, their movements coordinated, efficient, lifting the man with a kind of careful urgency that made Emily realize this was not just concern. This was something else, something deeper, something practiced, like they had done this before, like this world existed long before she accidentally stepped into it. "Is he going to be okay?" she asked, her voice smaller than she intended. The man's gaze did not soften, but something in it shifted, a flicker, gone as quickly as it came. "He will be," he said, then added, almost as an afterthought, "because you found him." Emily frowned, confusion tightening her chest. "I do not understand," she admitted, her fingers curling slightly as if still remembering the cold weight of the ring. His eyes dropped briefly to her hands, then back to her face, sharper now, more focused. "No," he said, "you do not." And for a moment, neither of them spoke, the rain continuing to fall around them, filling the silence with a steady rhythm that only made everything else feel more unreal. Then one of the men approached, leaning slightly toward him, murmuring something too low for Emily to hear. The man's expression darkened almost imperceptibly, his attention snapping back to her with renewed intensity. "You should not be here when this becomes complicated," he said, the words careful, measured, as if chosen with precision. Emily's heart skipped. "Complicated?" she repeated, the word catching in her throat. But before he could answer, a sound cut through the alley. Footsteps, hurried, uneven, echoing from the far end. All movement around her stopped instantly. The men turned, alert, their posture shifting in a way that made Emily realize just how controlled they had been before, how much of their stillness had been a choice. The man did not look away from her immediately, but when he did, it was with a subtle shift that felt like a door closing, something colder settling into place. "Stay behind me," he said, and this time, it was not a suggestion. Emily did not argue, did not question, she simply moved, instinct overriding logic as she stepped closer, her shoulder nearly brushing his arm, and for the first time, she noticed it fully, the unnatural chill that surrounded him, not like the cold air of the night, but something deeper, something that felt like standing too close to a shadow that did not belong. The footsteps grew louder, then stopped abruptly at the mouth of the alley, a figure standing there, partially hidden by darkness, watching. The tension snapped tight, invisible but undeniable. Emily's breath caught, her mind racing, trying to make sense of what she was seeing, what she was feeling, but nothing fit, nothing aligned with the world she knew. The man beside her took a single step forward, placing himself fully between her and the stranger, his voice dropping, quieter than before, but heavier, carrying a weight that seemed to press into the air itself. "You are early," he said, the words simple, but the meaning beneath them anything but. The figure at the end of the alley did not move, did not respond immediately, and in that silence, Emily felt it, the realization settling in her bones. This was not a coincidence. This was not random. Whatever she had stepped into, it had been waiting long before she arrived, and now, standing there in the rain, with strangers who moved like shadows and spoke like commands, she understood something she wished she did not. There was no going back to the life she had before, because somehow, without knowing it, without meaning to, she had just become part of theirs. The silence did not break, it stretched, thin and sharp, until it felt like it might snap at any second, and Emily could hear her own heartbeat louder than the rain, louder than the distant hum of the city beyond the alley. The figure at the entrance took one slow step forward into the dim light, not rushing, not hesitating, as if time itself bent around him. And something in Emily's chest tightened without warning, an instinct she did not understand telling her this was not just another stranger, This was something else entirely. The man beside her did not move at first, but she felt the shift in him, subtle, controlled, like a blade being drawn without sound. "You were told to stay away," he said, his voice still calm, still measured, but now there was something beneath it, something colder, heavier, the kind of tone that did not need to rise to be dangerous. The other man stopped a few feet into the alley, just enough for the faint light to catch his face, pale, composed, his eyes reflecting something unnatural. "And you were told to handle this quietly," the stranger replied, his voice smooth, almost polite, but it carried an edge that made Emily's breath hitch. She did not understand the words fully, but she understood the tension, the invisible line drawn between them, the kind that did not need explanation. The men behind her shifted again, positioning themselves without being told, forming a barrier she had not noticed before. And suddenly Emily realized she was not just being protected, she was being contained. The thought sent a chill through her that had nothing to do with the rain. "You should not be here," the man beside her said again, this time not to her, but to the figure ahead, and for the first time, Emily heard something else in his voice, not fear, not uncertainty, but something close to warning. The stranger's gaze flicked past him, landing on Emily for just a fraction of a second, and that was enough. The look was too knowing, too precise, like he had already decided something about her without speaking a word. Her fingers tightened against her sleeves, every instinct telling her to step back, to run, but her feet stayed where they were, anchored by something she could not explain. "So this is her," the stranger said quietly, almost to himself, and Emily felt the weight of those words settle over her like a shadow. She swallowed, her voice barely above a whisper. "I do not understand what is happening." The man in front of her did not turn to answer, did not reassure her, but his presence shifted. Slightly, just enough that she knew he had heard her. "You were not meant to," he said, still watching the other man, still standing between them. "That was never part of the plan." The stranger took another step closer, slow, deliberate, his hands visible, his posture relaxed in a way that felt almost intentional, like he was proving something without saying it. "Plans change," he replied, his eyes never leaving Emily now, and the air seemed to grow colder with each step he took. Emily's pulse spiked, her thoughts racing, trying to piece together fragments of a situation that made no sense. She had been walking home minutes ago, thinking about rent, about work, about whether she could afford groceries this week, and now she was standing in an alley surrounded by people who spoke in half sentences and moved like they belonged to a different world entirely. The man beside her finally moved, just one step forward, but it was enough to shift everything, the space between him and the stranger closing slightly, the tension tightening. "You will leave," he said, and this time there was no softness left in his voice, no room for interpretation. The stranger tilted his head slightly, as if considering the words, then smiled faintly, not amused, not warm, just acknowledging. "You already know I will not," he said, and then, almost casually, "Not after she called you." Emily's breath caught, her mind snagging on that one word, called. Her grip tightened unconsciously, the memory of the phone in her hand, the number on the ring, the voice on the other end. Everything suddenly felt heavier, more real. The man beside her went still, completely still, and in that stillness, Emily felt it again, that shift, deeper this time, like something ancient had just been acknowledged, something irreversible. "You should not have answered," the stranger continued softly. "But you did," his gaze sharpened slightly, focusing on Emily with unsettling precision. "And now she is part of this." The words hung in the air, final, undeniable, and Emily felt something inside her drop, a quiet realization settling into place. This was not a misunderstanding, not something she could explain away or walk out of. This was a line she had already crossed, whether she understood it or not, and the man beside her finally turned his head just slightly, not fully, but enough that she caught the edge of his expression, the faintest trace of something she had not seen before, something that looked dangerously close to regret. "You should not have been there tonight," he said quietly, not as an accusation, not as a warning, but as a fact, and somehow, that made it worse, because for the first time, Emily understood that whatever came next, It had already begun. The moment lingered too long, stretched thin between three people who all understood something Emily did not, and that silence became louder than any argument could have been, pressing against her ears until she felt like she might break under it. The stranger's faint smile did not fade, but it changed, sharpening just slightly as if he had reached a conclusion. "You feel it, do you not?" he said quietly, his voice directed at her now, not the man standing in front of her, and Emily's breath caught because she did feel something wrong, something pulling at her chest like an invisible thread tightening with every second she stood there. She shook her head instinctively, even though the denial felt hollow. "I do not know what you mean," she said, her voice unsteady despite her effort to control it. The man beside her moved just slightly, enough that his shoulder blocked more of her from the stranger's view. "That is enough," he said, sharper now, final, but the stranger did not retreat, did not even look offended. Instead, he studied her more carefully, as if she had become more interesting with every word she spoke. "Of course she does not understand," he replied calmly. "You would not have told her." A pause, deliberate, then softer. "You never tell them." The words landed heavier than they should have, and Emily felt something twist in her chest, a flicker of unease that had nothing to do with the cold or the rain, because suddenly it felt like she was missing something important, something everyone else already knew. "Tell me what?" she asked, the question slipping out before she could stop it. The man in front of her did not turn this time, did not answer immediately, and that silence was worse than anything he could have said. The stranger's expression shifted again, not mocking, not cruel, just certain. "What you have become," he said simply. And Emily felt the ground beneath her feet tilt, not physically, but enough to make her steady herself, her fingers pressing into her own arms as if to remind herself she was still there, still real. "I have not become anything," she said quickly, the words coming faster now, sharper, as if saying them out loud might make them true. "I just helped someone, that is all." The man beside her finally turned slightly, his gaze meeting hers for the briefest moment, and in that single glance, she saw it, something she had not noticed before, not coldness, not control, but something dangerously close to conflict. "It is not that simple," he said quietly, and something in the way he said it made her chest tighten even more, because it sounded like a warning he did not want to give. The stranger took another step forward, ignoring the shift in tension around them. "It is never simple with you," he said to the man. Then his attention snapped back to Emily. "You touched something you should not have." His voice dropped slightly, softer, but more intense. "And now it has touched you back." Emily's pulse spiked, the words settling into her mind in a way she could not ignore. She looked down at her hands instinctively, half expecting to see something different, something changed, but there was nothing, just her skin, pale under the rain, trembling slightly from the cold. "That does not make sense," she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. The man in front of her exhaled slowly, a controlled motion that felt deliberate, like he was choosing his next words carefully. "It does not need to make sense," he said, his voice low, steady. "It only needs to be true." Emily's throat tightened, her thoughts spiraling, trying to find something logical, something normal to hold on to. But every second made that harder. The stranger's gaze softened just a fraction, not with kindness, but with something that looked almost like curiosity. "You feel it, do not you?" he repeated, quieter this time. That pull, and Emily froze. Because she did, she hated that she did. There was something there, faint but undeniable, like a thread tying her to something she could not see, something she could not explain, and before she could stop herself, she looked at the man beside her. And that was when it changed. The moment their eyes met, the feeling sharpened, intensified, like the connection snapped into place all at once. Her breath caught, her chest tightening as if something inside her had just recognized something inside him. And for a split second, everything else disappeared. The rain, the alley, the stranger, all of it fading into the background, leaving only that connection, raw and impossible. The man's expression shifted instantly, his control tightening, his gaze hardening as if he had felt it too, as if he understood exactly what had just happened. And that made it worse, because Emily did not. "No," he said under his breath, barely audible, but it carried weight. Resistance. The kind that comes too late. The stranger saw it. Of course he did, his faint smile returning. Not amused, not pleased, just certain. There it is, he said quietly. Now she understands. Emily shook her head quickly, stepping back instinctively. Breaking the moment. Breaking whatever that was. Her heart racing too fast, her thoughts too loud. I do not understand. Anything, she said, her voice rising despite herself. The man stepped forward immediately, closing the space she had created, not touching her, but close enough that the distance felt intentional, protective. You do not need to, he said firmly, his tone leaving no room for argument. But the stranger tilted his head slightly, watching them both with quiet interest. She already does, he replied. And Emily realized with a sinking certainty that whatever had just happened between them, whatever she had felt in that brief, impossible moment, it was not something she could ignore anymore, and it was not something she could undo. The moment shattered the second she stepped back, but the feeling did not disappear. It lingered, sharp and unfamiliar, like a whisper she could not unhear, and Emily's breath came faster now. Uneven, her thoughts scrambling for something solid, something real to hold on to. But there was nothing. Only that pull, that impossible connection that made no sense and yet refused to fade. We are leaving, the man said suddenly, his voice cutting clean through the tension like a decision already made. Final. Absolute. The men behind him moved instantly. No hesitation, no questions. As if they had been waiting for that command. The stranger did not try to stop them, did not move at all, but his eyes followed Emily, steady, knowing, and that was worse, because it felt like he was letting her go, like he knew something she did not. You can walk away, he said quietly, his voice softer now, almost conversational, but it will not change what has already begun. Emily froze for half a second, the words sinking in deeper than she wanted them to. Then the man beside her stepped closer, not touching her, but close enough that she felt it again. That cold presence wrapping around her like a shield she had never asked for. Ignore him, he said, low and controlled, and something in his tone made her want to listen. Even when her instincts screamed that ignoring any part of this was no longer possible, she nodded faintly, more out of reflex than understanding, as the men guided her toward the waiting vehicles, her steps unsteady, her mind still trying to catch up with everything that had just happened. The rain continued to fall, relentless, washing over the alley as if it could erase what had taken place there. But Emily knew it could not, because whatever had changed, it was not outside of her, it was inside, and it was not going away. The car door opened beside her, smooth, silent, and she hesitated, just for a second, her gaze flickering back toward the entrance of the alley. The stranger was still there, watching, unmoving, his figure half hidden in shadow, but his presence unmistakable, and for a moment, she felt it again, that strange sense of certainty, like he already knew where this would end, like he had seen it unfold long before she ever stepped into this night. Emily, the man said, and the sound of her name pulled her back instantly, her attention snapping to him, her heart skipping at the way he said it, not questioning, not asking, but knowing. How do you know my name? She asked, the question slipping out before she could stop it. His expression did not change, but something in his eyes shifted, something quieter, more guarded. You told me, he said, and for a second, she almost believed him, until she realized she had not fully, not clearly, not in a way that explained the certainty in his voice. The thought sent a small chill down her spine, but before she could press further, he stepped back slightly, giving her space to enter the vehicle. Get in, he said, and this time, she did not hesitate. She slid into the seat, the interior warm, silent, the world outside immediately muffled as the door closed, cutting off the rain, the alley, everything, leaving only the soft hum of the engine and the steady rhythm of her own breathing. The man entered on the other side, the space shifting again the moment he sat beside her, that same cold presence settling into the air, but now it felt different, less distant, more immediate, like she was too close to ignore it. The car began to move, smooth, effortless, pulling away from the alley as if nothing had happened, as if her life had not just split into two separate paths, one she could never return to. She stared out the window, watching the city blur past in streaks of light and shadow, familiar streets that suddenly felt foreign, unreachable. "Where are we going?" she asked quietly, her voice steadier now, but still carrying the weight of everything she did not understand. He did not answer immediately, and that silence stretched just long enough to make her chest tighten again. Then finally, "Somewhere safe," he said, and there was something in the way he said it that made her realize safety no longer meant what it used to. She turned her head slightly, studying him now, really studying him. The sharp lines of his face, the unnatural stillness, the way even sitting still felt intentional, controlled, like every movement was chosen, nothing wasted, nothing accidental. Safe from what? She pressed, and this time, he looked at her, fully, his gaze steady, unwavering, and for a brief moment, that connection flickered again, subtle but undeniable, like something between them refusing to stay quiet. "From what comes next," he said simply, and Emily felt her stomach drop, because she already knew. Whatever came next was not something she could stop, and not something she could escape. The city lights stretched into long, blurred lines outside the window as the car moved faster than Emily expected, smooth and silent like it was gliding rather than driving. And with every passing second, the distance between her and everything familiar grew wider, heavier, until it felt like she had crossed into something that no longer had a way back. She pressed her hand lightly against the glass, grounding herself in the cool surface, watching reflections flicker over her fingers, but even that felt distant, like she was watching someone else's life unfold instead of her own. "You are very quiet," he said after a while, his voice cutting gently through the silence, not harsh, not demanding, but impossible to ignore. Emily let out a slow breath, her eyes still fixed on the window. "I am trying to understand," she admitted, her voice low, steady but strained beneath the surface. "But nothing makes sense." The words hung there between them, heavier than she expected. He did not respond immediately, and that pause told her more than an answer would have, because it meant he already knew there was no simple explanation. "It will not," he said finally, his tone calm, almost detached, but there was something underneath it, something that sounded like experience, like certainty. "Not yet." Emily turned her head slightly, studying him again, searching for something human in his expression, something she could recognize, but there was only control, precise and unshakable, like he had mastered every reaction long ago. "Then start with something simple," she said, her voice firmer now, pushing past the fear that had settled in her chest. "Who are you?" The question lingered, direct, unavoidable, and for the first time, he did not deflect it immediately. His gaze shifted slightly, not away from her, but inward, as if weighing something, deciding how much to reveal, how much to keep. "My name is Lucien," he said at last, the words quiet but grounded, like they carried weight beyond their simplicity. Emily held his gaze, waiting for more, and when it did not come, she pressed further. "That is not enough," she said, her voice steady now, sharper. "Not after everything that just happened." Something in his expression changed, not visibly, not dramatically, but enough that she felt it, a shift in the air between them, subtle but real. "No," he agreed softly. "It is not." And for a brief moment, the silence returned, but this time it felt different, less tense, more deliberate, like something was about to be said that could not be taken back. "You stepped into something that does not belong to your world," he continued, his tone measured, careful, "and now it cannot let you go." Emily's chest tightened, her fingers curling slightly in her lap as she absorbed the words, because deep down, she already knew they were true, even if she did not understand how. "And you?" she asked quietly, her voice softer now, but no less direct. "Do you belong to that world?" Lucien did not look away, did not hesitate this time. "I am that world," he said, and the words settled into the space between them like something final, something undeniable. Emily felt her breath catch again, her mind racing to interpret what that meant, but before she could speak, before she could question it further, the car began to slow, the movement subtle but noticeable. The city outside shifting from crowded streets to something quieter, darker, more isolated. She glanced out the window again and saw it. The gates, tall, wrought iron, rising out of the darkness like something pulled from another time. They opened before the car even reached them, silent, automatic, as if expecting them, as if waiting. Emily's stomach dropped, a quiet unease settling deeper into her chest. "Where are we?" she asked. Even though she already knew the answer would not comfort her, Lucien's gaze followed hers briefly, then returned to her, steady, unreadable. "Somewhere you will begin to understand," he said. And this time, there was no softness in his voice, no reassurance, only truth. The car moved forward again, passing through the gates as they closed behind them without a sound, sealing off the outside world completely. And as the estate came into view, vast, shadowed, illuminated only by dim, cold lights that seemed to reveal just enough and nothing more, Emily realized something with quiet certainty. She had not just entered a place, she had crossed into a different reality entirely, one that had rules she did not know, one that had already begun to pull her in, and sitting beside her, still, controlled, watching her with eyes that held far more than he had said, was the only person who understood exactly how deep she had already fallen. The gates closed behind them with a final, soundless certainty, and Emily felt it in her chest, like something invisible had just locked into place. The car rolling forward along a long, winding drive lined with towering trees that blocked out the rest of the world, their branches arching overhead like a silent tunnel, and the deeper they went, the quieter everything became. No city noise, no distant sirens, not even the hum of passing traffic, just the soft glide of the car and the faint rhythm of her own breathing. "This place," she started, but the words faded as the estate fully revealed itself, rising out of the darkness like something untouched by time. Vast stone walls, tall windows glowing faintly with cold light, every detail precise, deliberate, as if it had been designed to remind anyone who entered exactly how small they were. Emily swallowed, her throat dry. "This is where you live?" she asked, even though the question felt too small for what she was seeing. Lucien did not look impressed, did not look proud. He simply nodded once. "This is where I exist," he corrected, and the choice of words settled heavily in her mind. Exist, not live. The car slowed to a stop beneath a covered entrance, and before she could process it fully, the door beside her opened. A man standing there, waiting, his posture straight, his expression neutral, but his eyes flicked toward her with something she could not quite place. Not curiosity, not hostility, something more cautious, as if he already knew what she was without understanding how. Emily hesitated for a second, her hand resting on the edge of the seat. But the moment Lucien stepped out on the other side, the air shifted again, that same presence filling the space, and without thinking, she followed, her feet touching the smooth stone beneath her, the cold seeping through her shoes instantly. She straightened slowly, her gaze lifting to take in the full height of the building. And for a moment, she felt impossibly small, like she had stepped into a place that was never meant for someone like her. "Stay close," Lucien said quietly, already moving forward, and there was something in his tone that made her listen without question. She fell into step beside him, the large doors opening before they even reached them, revealing a grand hall beyond, dimly lit, silent, the air inside cooler than outside, carrying a faint, unfamiliar scent that she could not place, something old, something distant. Her footsteps echoed softly as she stepped inside, the sound swallowed quickly by the vastness of the space. And for the first time since this night began, she felt it clearly. She did not belong here. Every detail reminded her of it. The polished floors, the towering ceilings, the quiet presence of others standing at a distance, watching, always watching, their eyes following her as she moved, assessing, calculating, and none of them spoke, none of them approached, which somehow made it worse. "They know," she whispered, more to herself than to him. But Lucien heard. "Of course he did. They feel it," he said simply, not slowing, not turning. Emily's heart tightened. "Feel what?" she asked. But even as the words left her mouth, she knew the answer. She felt it too. That same pull, that same invisible thread that had first appeared in the alley. Only now it was stronger, clearer, like it had found something to anchor to. Lucien stopped abruptly, turning to face her fully, and the sudden shift made her freeze. his gaze locking onto hers with an intensity that stole the air from her lungs. "You need to understand something," he said, his voice low, controlled, but there was something beneath it now, something she had not heard before, something that sounded dangerously close to urgency. "What you are feeling is not confusion," he continued. "It is recognition." Emily's breath caught, her chest tightening as that word echoed in her mind. Recognition. It should not make sense, but somehow it did, in a way she could not explain. Her fingers curled slightly at her sides, her pulse quickening. "That is not possible," she said quietly, shaking her head, but her voice lacked conviction, because deep down, she could not deny it anymore. Lucien stepped closer, not touching her, but close enough that the air between them felt charged, alive. "It already happened," he said, his gaze unwavering, and for a moment, everything else faded again. The hall, the watching eyes, the weight of the place itself, all of it dissolving into the background, leaving only that connection, stronger now, undeniable, and Emily felt it clearly. That pull, that impossible sense of familiarity, like something inside her had already made a choice her mind could not understand. Her breath trembled, her voice barely a whisper. "What did I do?" And for the first time, Lucien did not answer immediately, his expression shifting slightly, something guarded slipping through, something that looked almost like reluctance. "You did not choose this," he said slowly, "but it chose you." The words settled between them, heavy, final, and Emily realized with a quiet, terrifying clarity that whatever this was, whatever had begun the moment she reached out her hand in that alley, it was no longer something she could question, it was something she had to face, whether she was ready or not. The word lingered between them like something alive, something that refused to fade, and Emily felt it settle deep in her chest, heavier with every second, as if the truth of it was slowly taking root whether she accepted it or not. The silence stretched again, but this time it was different, not empty, not uncertain, but filled with something unspoken, something waiting, and before she could find the right words, before she could even form a thought that felt steady, a voice cut through the air behind her, sharp, precise. "So it is true." Emily turned instantly, her breath catching as she realized they were no longer alone. Figures had gathered at the far end of the hall, not many, but enough, their presence deliberate, their eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her stomach tighten. They did not rush forward, did not speak loudly, but the weight of their attention was undeniable. "You brought her here," another voice added, calmer, but no less sharp. Lucien did not turn immediately, did not react in any visible way, but Emily felt it, that shift again, that tightening of control, like something inside him had locked into place. "She is under my protection," he said, his voice low, steady, but carrying across the hall with effortless authority. The figures did not move closer, but their expressions changed, subtle, calculating, as if weighing his words against something else, something older. "Protection," the first voice repeated, almost thoughtfully, or possession. The word hit differently, and Emily felt it immediately, her breath catching, her chest tightening as if the air itself had changed. Lucien's gaze flickered slightly, not toward her, but toward them, and when he spoke again, his voice was colder, sharper. "Be careful," he said quietly. "You are speaking beyond your place." The warning was clear, but it did not silence them. If anything, it seemed to confirm something. One of the figures stepped forward slightly, just enough to catch more light, revealing a composed face, pale, controlled, eyes that held no warmth, only interest. "She is human," the man said, his tone measured, "and yet every one of us can feel it." Emily's heart pounded, the words echoing in her mind, because she knew what he meant. She felt it too, that pull, that connection, stronger now in this place than it had ever been before, like something inside her was responding to something inside all of them, and it terrified her. That should not be possible. Another voice added, quieter now, almost uncertain. Lucien finally turned, fully this time, placing himself between her and them without hesitation, his presence filling the space like a wall they could not see through. "And yet it is," he said, his tone final, leaving no room for debate. The hall fell quiet again, but this silence was different, heavier, filled with tension that had not been there before. Emily stood frozen behind him, her mind racing, trying to understand what they were saying, what they were implying, because it was not just about her being here. It was about what she had become, what she now represented, even if she did not understand it herself. "You know what this means," the man in front said after a moment, his gaze fixed on Lucien, not on her anymore, as if she had already been defined, already placed into something larger than herself. Lucien did not respond immediately, and that hesitation, that single moment of silence, felt louder than anything else that had been said, because it meant he did know, and whatever it was not simple. Emily felt her chest tighten again, her voice barely above a whisper. "Tell me," she said, the words slipping out before she could stop them. Lucien did not did not look back at her, but she felt the shift in him, the weight of the decision pressing down. "It means," he began slowly, his voice quieter now, more controlled than before, "that you are no longer invisible to this world." The words landed harder than she expected, because she understood them in a way she could not explain. She had been invisible before, just another person passing through life unnoticed, but now, every eye in the room was on her, every presence aware of her in a way that felt overwhelming, suffocating. "And that makes her a risk," one of them said sharply, the word cutting through the air. Emily flinched slightly, her fingers curling at her sides, the tension rising again, sharper now, more focused. Lucien's voice dropped, colder than before. "She is not a risk," he said, each word deliberate, controlled. "She is under my protection." The repetition of the phrase felt different this time, heavier, more final, like a line being drawn. The figures exchanged brief glances, silent communication passing between them, and for the first time, Emily understood something clearly. This was not just about her. This was about power, about control, about something much larger than she had ever imagined. "Protection does not change what she is," the man replied, his tone calm, but firm, and Emily felt that again. That pull, that invisible thread tightening, as if responding to the words, as if confirming them. Her breath caught, her chest rising and falling too quickly now, because deep down, she already knew. Whatever she had become, whatever had begun that night, it was not something that could be hidden, and it was not something they would ignore. Lucien finally turned slightly, just enough that she caught his profile, the sharp line of his jaw, the stillness in his expression, and when he spoke again, his voice carried something new, something undeniable. "Then they will learn to accept it," he said, and the finality in his tone sent a quiet shock through the room, because it was not a suggestion, not a request, it was a declaration, and in that moment, Emily realized something that made her breath catch all over again. She was not just caught in this world. She had just become the center of something that even they could not control. The word lingered between them like something alive, something that refused to fade, and Emily felt it settle deep in her chest, heavier with every second, as if the truth of it was slowly taking root whether she accepted it or not. The silence stretched again, but this time it was different, not empty, not uncertain, but filled with something unspoken, something waiting, and before she could find the right words, before she could even form a thought that felt steady, a voice cut through the air behind her, sharp, precise. "So it is true." Emily turned instantly, her breath catching as she realized they were no longer alone. Figures had gathered at the far end of the hall, not many, but enough, their presence deliberate, their eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her stomach tighten. They did not rush forward, did not speak loudly, but the weight of their attention was undeniable. "You brought her here," another voice added, calmer, but no less sharp. Lucien did not turn immediately, did not react in any visible way, but Emily felt it, that shift again, that tightening of control, like something inside him had locked into place. "She is under my protection," he said, his voice low, steady, but carrying across the hall with effortless authority. The figures did not move closer, but their expressions changed, subtle, calculating, as if weighing his words against something else, something older. "Protection," the first voice repeated, almost thoughtfully. "Or possession." The word hit differently, and Emily felt it immediately, her breath catching, her chest tightening as if the air itself had changed. Lucien's gaze flickered slightly, not toward her, but toward them, and when he spoke again, his voice was colder, sharper. "Be careful," he said quietly. "You are speaking beyond your place." The warning was clear, but it did not silence them. If anything, it seemed to confirm something. One of the figures stepped forward slightly, just enough to catch more light, revealing a composed face, pale, controlled, eyes that held no warmth, only interest. "She is human," the man said, his tone measured, "and yet every one of us can feel it." Emily's heart pounded, the words echoing in her mind, because she knew what he meant. She felt it too. That pull, that connection, stronger now in this place than it had ever been before, like something inside her was responding to something inside all of them, and it terrified her. That should not be possible. Another voice added, quieter now, almost uncertain. Lucien finally turned, fully this time, placing himself between her and them without hesitation, his presence filling the space like a wall they could not see through. "And yet it is," he said, his tone final, leaving no room for debate. The hall fell quiet again, but this silence was different, heavier, filled with tension that had not been there before. Emily stood frozen behind him, her mind racing, trying to understand what they were saying, what they were implying, because it was not just about her being here, it was about what she had become, what she now represented, even if she did not understand it herself. "You know what this means," the man in front said after a moment, his gaze fixed on Lucien, not on her anymore, as if she had already been defined, already placed into something larger than herself. Lucien did not respond immediately, and that hesitation, that single moment of silence, felt louder than anything else that had been said, because it meant he did know, and whatever it was not simple. Emily felt her chest tighten again, her voice barely above a whisper. "Tell me," she said, the words slipping out before she could stop them. Lucien did not turn, did not look back at her, but she felt the shift in him, the weight of the decision pressing down. "It means," he began slowly, his voice quieter now, more controlled than before, "that you are no longer invisible to this world." The words landed harder than she expected, because she understood them in a way she could not explain. She had been invisible before, just another person passing through life unnoticed, but now, every eye in the room was on her, every presence aware of her in a way that felt overwhelming, suffocating. "And that makes her a writ new, something undeniable. Then they will learn to accept it," he said, and the finality in his tone sent a quiet shock through the room, because it was not a suggestion, not a request, it was a declaration. And in that moment, Emily realized something that made her breath catch all over again. She was not just caught in this world, she had just become the center of something that even they could not control.